All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Thursday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week so far. Jam-packed show for you today. We had excellent games in our Wednesday night slate last night. The Boston Celtics went on the road into Philly, and the Philadelphia 76ers kind of took care of business against them. We're up 15 late before a late flurry from Jaylen Brown, and Kristaps Porzingis kind of made it look like it was a game, but it was a dominant effort from the Philadelphia 76ers. And then we got kind of a weird version of the Nuggets-Warriors matchup as Jamal Murray and Draymond Green missed the game. Klay Thompson kind of sort of had a chance at the end of the game to potentially tie, but fumbled a pass away from Chris Paul. A lot of interesting stuff to get into. And then I want to complain about the Lakers a little bit more, but they are officially relegated to the end of the show. That's where the Lakers are going to be until they start playing good basketball. But I have some compliments that I want to pay to the Houston Rockets, who are, guess what, one of 4 teams in the NBA to be top 10 in both offense and defense right now. Philadelphia 76ers, the Denver Nuggets, the Boston Celtics, and the Houston Rockets are your 4 teams that are top 10 in both. So we're going to lay a little bit of praise on the Rockets. I'm going to complain about the Lakers, and then we'll be done for the day. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel. Don't forget, we're doing a giveaway for anybody who lives in Los Angeles. We're giving away tickets to a Lakers-Blazers game here in less than a week, a few days away. And all you got to do is post a screenshot of you being subscribed to our new YouTube channel for you to get included in that drawing. So make sure you go to my Twitter feed and scroll down to where you see I've quoted the Volumes tweet about that contest and drop that screenshot in there. If you don't live in the LA area, it would still mean a lot to me if you guys took a couple minutes just to scroll down, a couple seconds, I should say, just to scroll down and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. Social media, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter mainly is where I'm posting the vast majority of the visual representations of the things I talk about when I do my film sessions. I'm dropping clips there. And then give us mailbag questions in the YouTube comments. We're not going to do any mailbag questions today, but we hit 5 yesterday. We kind of hit them periodically throughout the week, so make sure you drop those in the YouTube comments. All right, last but not least, before we get started, baseball's officially over, but everything else is in full swing. We've got college basketball kicking up, the NBA. We got college football in full swing, the NFL in the heart of their season. And there's still concerts and comedy shows touring around the country. And if you want to get a ticket to any of these, try Game Time, the fastest growing ticketing app in the United States. If you want to go see your favorite football team, if you want to go see your favorite basketball team, they've got a deal for you. If there's a musician that's touring around that you want to hear, if there's a comedian that you want to hear, they've got a deal for you. No matter where you live, get out and have some fun this week. Download the Game Time app. Enter your email and redeem code HOOPS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, enter your email and code HOOPS, that's HOOPS, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's talk some basketball. So again, weird game in Nuggets Warriors. Jamal Murray was out, and so you got a steady dose of Reggie Jackson, which just doesn't really bring the other half of that 2-man game gravity that Jamal Murray brings. So even though Draymond was out, which presented a bunch of other weird things, right? Like you got a lot of like Dario Saric minutes with Nikola Jokic on the floor, which I don't think will ever happen in a playoff series as long as the Warriors are healthy. So like obviously a weird game in terms of the matchups and some of the chess pieces that you would see in a playoff series, right? Like arguably the second or third best player for the Warriors and arguably, or for sure, the second best player on the Nuggets missing that game. But at the same time, it was a good opportunity to learn about some specific different things, right? Like down the stretch of that game, the Warriors were really spamming pick and roll. And I want to give a special shout out to JJ Redick here, and Mark Jones for doing a really nice job during the broadcast of just calling out this chess match as it was taking place. I think having JJ Redick on ESPN to do the color commentary on these games has been such a treat for basketball fans, because like he just brings so much of that basic insight to help fans understand the actual tactical things that are taking place on the floor. So shout out to JJ Redick there. But he did a really nice job of pointing out what was taking place down the stretch of this game, which was the Warriors were basically trying to pull Nikola Jokic away from the rim in pick and roll and essentially bring 2 on the ball to Steph Curry and then hit Kevon Looney with that pass into the pocket. And then JJ did a really nice job breaking down one of the big differences between what the Warriors do and a lot of other teams is they cut out of the weak side corner, which is just a higher percentage play. You got to have an athlete there But think of it, to put it simply, think of it like this. A lot of times in pick and roll, you're making that kick out pass and it's a wide open corner three, right? And the Warriors still will occasionally get those corner threes. We saw those famously in the 2015 NBA Finals with Andre Iguodala getting the benefit of those off of Draymond Green passes, right? But one of the things the Warriors have done in recent years is it requires the way Steph gets guarded for this to work, because in a normal pick and roll coverage, if the guard's working downhill and the big is in more of a little bit more of a drop than a high hedge or a blitz, if he's dropping back, then the low man is the guy guarding the guy in the weak side corner. He can kind of help without having to fully abandon his matchup and still kind of keep an eye on man and ball, right? That's the difference. Whereas with Steph, because of the fact that he pulls that second defender so far away from the basket, now the roll man, in this case Kevon Looney, is catching with a clear run to the basket. And so as a result, that low man has to completely abandon that corner to step up and help. And so if you have the timing right, and as long as it's a habit from that lineup, and it's a lot of their athletes, right? It's Andrew Wiggins, it's Jonathan Kuminga, it's Gary Payton II out of that weak side corner. They will cut along the baseline, and it's just an easy drop off for a basket. So they got the Nuggets, I think, 3 or 4 times with that in the fourth quarter as they started to get going. And, it kind of like, it starts slow, right? Like there was a play in the second quarter where Steph got Kentavious Caldwell-Pope caught on a screen because KCP was doing a really nice job guarding Steph for the majority of the game. But it's just a really, really difficult job to do, to stay glued to a player that's gifted moving without the basketball. Steph is incredibly gifted at setting his man up for screens because he's got such a good handle, and he's always a threat to reject the screen and go the other way, right? KCP just constantly stayed attached. But towards the end of the game, the Warriors finally started to generate just tiny bits of separation. You saw in that second quarter, he finally I clipped this play so you can see it on my Twitter feed, but you see he finally gets KCP caught on the screen, and Jokic is in more of a high drop than a blitz, and so he's up at the level, but he's still giving Steph a little bit of space. He hits him with a between the legs step back and hits a pull-up three, right? That's kind of the progression. He burns you a couple times, then you start just basically blitzing and coming way out higher above the level of the screen to try to contain that, which is then what opens up the short roll. Well, what Mike Malone did with a few minutes left to counter that, and it completely changed the dynamic of the Warriors offense down the stretch, is they moved Aaron Gordon onto Kevon Looney, which allows them to switch that Steph Looney pick and roll, right? Now, what was interesting there is that ended up leading to the next phase of the chess match, which is, okay, where do you put Jokic in this case? Well, there were several possessions down the stretch, and he ended up on Chris Paul for 2 of them, and then he ended up on Klay Thompson for another. And so then the Warriors, what was kind of cool about it from the standpoint of the Nuggets, is the Warriors did what you would kind of expect, right? So they immediately just went to attacking Jokic through those other 2 matchups, right? So like Chris Paul starts trying to ISO Nikola Jokic on the right wing, and he just can't shake him free, right? Then there's Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson gets Jokic on the next possession, and he actually manages to beat him off the dribble, but Jokic kind of flattens the drive out, so he's not really going aggressively towards the basket. But I think it was Reggie Jackson out of the left side corner reaches in and just rakes down on Klay Thompson as he's driving, which gives him 2 free throws, right? But then there was another possession where Chris Paul got Nikola Jokic in pick and roll. They ended up setting a ball screen, and he missed a pull-up 3, a decent look at a pull-up 3, but he missed it. And then there was one possession where, because of the way things went in transition, Jokic did end up on Looney again. And when he was on Looney, Chris Paul ran a ball screen with Jokic and got Looney on the slip for the run to the basket. But notice whose name I didn't say in any of that little diatribe there. Steph Curry. He was basically completely removed from the offense until that transition pull-up 3 he made late that kind of gave him a chance right before it turned into a foul shooting contest. And that's the beauty of it. Like by virtue of that chess match move, by moving Aaron Gordon onto Kevon Looney, they effectively tricked or Jedi mind tricked, whatever you want to call it, the Warriors into going away from Steph. Whereas what they should have done in that case is like just bring Chris Paul back up into the ball screen. If he's got Jokic on it, you run a Steph Chris Paul pick and roll, or have Steph set the ball screen on Nikola Jokic while Chris has the ball, because Jokic might not navigate the screen really well. Maybe you end up getting a switch with Steph onto Jokic, and then he can isolate there and make a play. But that's kind of the beauty of it, is like Steph was spamming this action and he was killing you. You made a smart adjustment, and it kind of Jedi mind tricked the Warriors into going away from their best player. And then down on the end, the other end of the floor, they got a couple of really good looks out of Jokic actions that iced the game. They ran an inverted ball screen with Reggie Jackson on the right wing, and one of the things that the Warriors will do whenever they run guard screens, meaning like guard setting the screen with Steph Curry's man, they'll do a classic hedge and recover. So they'll have Steph essentially show high on whoever it is that's the ball handler, and then as soon as whoever the ball handler's man recovers, Steph will sprint back to whoever the guard is who set the screen and play defense. Well, Jokic caught him hanging around just a second too long, and Reggie Jackson set the screen. He popped to the top of the key, and Steph stayed just a second too long on that hedge, and when he recovered, Reggie Jackson just ripped right to the basket and made a right-handed layup. And then on the final kind of post-up from Jokic on the right block, he had Looney. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope made the post entry, and on the post entry, KCP just makes a basic cut to the rim, just right off of Jokic's inside side, and Klay just on that cut is with KCP, but I don't know if it was from Steve Kerr from the standpoint of a game plan, a piece that came out of the huddle, or if it was just kind of an impromptu sort of thing from Klay. But Klay kind of like, as he was passing Jokic, it was like, maybe I'm going to help here, or maybe I'm going to double. And so he lingered just a second too long right as he was passing Jokic on that cut, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was wide open for the layup that basically iced the game. Now, late, we still got a Steph Curry left-handed layup off of a drive on KCP that he missed, and obviously we had the jump ball and the Klay Thompson kind of fumbled bad bounce pass from Chris Paul, but a lot of that was because of missed free throws. Like Nikola Jokic just inexplicably missed 2 free throws. That never happens. I think Reggie Jackson missed one as well. So like they missed 3 free throws at the game that gave the Warriors some late chances that otherwise they would not have had. But it was an interesting kind of little chess match there. And I think like in general, you know, I just lived through this chess match as a fan. I mean, obviously I covered all the series last year, but as a fan rooting for a team, I was rooting for the Lakers in that Lakers-Warriors series last year. And I lived through all of this. I lived through the experience of trying to navigate how difficult it is to guard Steph Curry and pick and roll. And one of the things they did in the Lakers series, which was smart, was they just kept bringing Anthony Davis's man up into the ball screen regardless of who he was guarding. So if it ended up being Gary Payton, they just bring Gary Payton up into the screen, right? Like whoever it was, they brought them up. And so that's the thing that the Warriors didn't do in this one game regular season sample size, but that's the thing that would be the inevitable adjustment, right? As you just start bringing Jokic up into the ball screen regardless of whether he's guarding Chris Paul or he's guarding Kevon Looney, right? But that said, like I thought, like in a lot of ways, it demonstrated the types of advantages that Denver's going to have regardless. Like the transition pushes, I think they're the best at this in the league. Just whenever they have an opportunity, you know, it's funny because they're not a particularly fast team. Like I'd say Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is an elite straight line athlete, and Aaron Gordon is an elite straight line athlete. But Michael Porter Jr., Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, these are average to below average athletes, right? They have great size. Like Jamal Murray's huge and strong for a guard. Michael Porter Jr. is tall, has long arms, and can move well. Michael's actually moving really well right now, but he's not as athletic as your typical wings that we have in the league, right? And then Jokic is a big body that's, you know, theoretically not a top tier linear athlete. Their bench is super athletic. Like the Nuggets bench has all sorts of straight line athletes, but like somehow the Nuggets still kill everybody in transition. And to me, it's a habit thing. They just have really good habits of identifying when there are opportunities to push the pace. It's almost like they identify whenever Aaron Gordon's man or Nikola Jokic's man like misses a layup or crashes the offensive glass on their end of the floor, they will identify that and sprint. And then they get these quick mismatches in transition, and it's a bucket damn near every time. They got Aaron Gordon on Steph Curry, switched a bunch of times in this game. Jokic has been killing people all season long with that type of transition push. That I think is super it's funny, we talk about, half-court offense, and half-court offense in and of itself is the bread and butter of what determines the outcomes of playoff series. But it isn't the entire thing. Like, let's just throw an arbitrary number. Like, let's pretend that half-court offense piece is 70% of it. What's the other 30%? The other 30% of it is everything on the margins. So, like being a good transition defense, being a good transition offense, being good on the glass on both ends of the floor. Execution out of timeouts, execution at the end of games, like your defensive versatility, your ability to switch up schemes depending on what's going on. Like, it's a huge advantage that Aaron Gordon is both strong enough to hang with an opposing post player, but quick enough to hang on the perimeter in a switch against someone like Steph Curry credibly, right? Like, obviously he's not going to lock up Steph Curry, but he can do as well on Steph Curry as what you'd expect from other perimeter defenders, right? That sort of versatility is a huge advantage there. So they have defensive versatility. They are a great transition offense. They're elite on the glass on both ends of the floor. And all that does is make it so that it's not just, you have to beat the Nuggets in the half court. You've got to beat them everywhere in every facet of the game because they're good everywhere. And that just kind of increases their margin for error. It makes it so that they can be without Jamal Murray and win games against elite teams, right? Jokic kind of has this ability. I talked about it yesterday on our show, but like Nikola Jokic going into last night's game was shooting damn near 90% on floaters and push shots. And he struggled a little bit with Looney in the first part of this game, but then I thought he kind of figured him out towards the end. The accuracy he has on those shots, the shot making ability that he has, puts him in a position where when Jamal Murray's out, he can just push up his usage and then make things happen like that. So I think he missed 11 shots last night, and that's uncharacteristic for Jokic, but because he's so damn efficient, he was still 14 for 25 or whatever it is that he was, and he still got generated more than enough offense to win the game. This team just has a massive margin for error, and they're getting solid production out of specific key role players off the bench. That's kind of maintaining that kind of flexibility as they navigate the ebbs and flows of the regular season. They're just in a really good spot. And Michael Porter Jr. is the last guy I wanted to shout out. He has been so good in so many ways, especially over the course of the last 2 weeks. He's making such better help and recover decisions defensively. He's leveraging his length and athleticism. Again, like, I don't think he moves as well as some of the other wings in the league, but when you combine how well he moves with him being 6'10" with super long arms, he can still be really impactful. He had another tip dunk last night off of an Aaron Gordon post-up. He caught Chris Paul not paying attention in help side, and that was his 8th offensive rebound putback of the season so far. He has the 10th most offensive rebound putbacks in the entire NBA. Like, that's how active Michael Porter Jr. has been on the offensive glass. And now his shot's starting to come around. He was 31% from 3 in 6 attempts in his first 5 games of the season, and now he's up to 44% on 8 attempts in his last 4 games. So that's a really good sign. Jamal Murray apparently is going to be out the rest of the month with his hamstring injury, so it'll be all that concept that I'm talking about in terms of malleability, variety, and margin for error is going to be put to the test in a big way over the course of the rest of this month, and especially as it pertains to the play-in tournament. But that's the thing. Like, if Denver ends up, running off a bunch of games without Jamal Murray, to me, that's a pretty strong indicator that this team is on track to be in a really good spot to repeat. Golden State, couple of specific things I wanted to hit. Jonathan Kuminga hit another left shoulder fadeaway in the post. He's up to 25 points on 21 post-ups this year, including passes. That's 1.19 points per possession. He's now tied with LeBron and Tobias Harris for the 21st most post points in the NBA. So, like, he's become like a legitimate matchup attacking wing for them. I was talking with Adam Morris about this a little bit this morning, because he thinks that it's a little bit more hot and cold, and I agree. There's a lot of bad with Kuminga in the post, like turnovers, forcing extremely difficult shots against smaller defenders when he could be going more aggressively to the rim. But he's making enough shots and he's getting to the foul line and it's producing the points. And so at the end of the day, like, young guys, you expect highs and lows. You expect highlights and you expect mistakes. Whereas, like, as players get better, there's fewer highlights, but there's more consistent, boring success, and then there's way fewer mistakes, right? So, like, obviously, like, the young player experience kind of comes with that sort of thing. But in general, I find that to be an encouraging early season trend that Kuminga's been so good attacking matchups in the post. And then don't forget, in the long term, like, this dude's going to have another 70 plus games or reps like this. So it's very possible that he ties off a lot of the mistake making tendencies as he moves along. Again, another game that came down to a late game pick and roll chess match, like we talked about earlier. One of the things that like kind of stood out to me is, like, you had CP3 with really favorable matchups as Jokic moved over to him, and he couldn't produce a bucket, aside from the one time that Jokic was back on Looney when he could run his traditional pick and roll. And, like, that's one of the things is, like Chris is going to have to be able to occasionally pitch in with a bucket against a switch, particularly against the center when things kind of go that way. And there's been a handful of games this year when Chris has had some scoring pop, but for the most part, he's really struggled to put the ball in the basket. And so that's something just to keep an eye on over the course of the rest of the season. But overall, a really encouraging effort. Again, Draymond's out. It's going to be totally different if Jamal Murray's in there too, because, like, you're going to slide Andrew Wiggins onto Jamal Murray in all likelihood. With Draymond in the lineup, you can do a lot more. You have a little bit more flexibility with the way you guard Jokic. Like, Jokic was really targeting Saric in this game. There's a play where he ran an inverted pick and roll where Saric was on Gordon, and he ran like a ball screen where he was the ball handler with Gordon at 10 feet away from the basket, got the switch onto Saric, then Gordon cleared out and took Looney with him, and then he just kind of hit Saric with a basic drop step and put it in the basket. Like, every time Jokic saw Saric, he saw food and his eyes lit up and he got an easy basket. So, like, are we going to see Saric on the floor with Jokic at the same time at all during a playoff series? Probably not. It's probably going to be a steady diet of Draymond and Looney with Saric against their bench units, running pick and pops with Chris Paul, right? So, like, don't want to take too much away from this matchup, but I did think it was an encouraging effort. Not many teams have gone into, I talked about this earlier, but that's the 8th win for the Nuggets, and I want to say that's just the 3rd win of those 8 that required a clutch situation, meaning the score was within 5 with less than 5 minutes left. So, like, they've been pretty much dominating people. And so for you to go into Denver and make a game of it and have a left-handed layup from Steph that could have tied the game late, even with the missed free throws, that is a really encouraging outcome. I also thought it was, again, Looney is not a Jokic stopper. I think that's overstated. I do think you can get away with more single coverage stuff with Looney than you normally would in a playoff series, and that's an advantage. Again, like, that's the thing. Like, if you can get, when it comes to superstars, you're not trying to stop them, especially the best players in the league. You're not trying to stop them. You're just trying to make the game harder for them. And I think Looney is capable of at least making Jokic work harder. And it's a really interesting idea of, like, the matchup archetypes, because, like, I think Anthony Davis is the best and most versatile defender in the NBA. And, like, there's a couple other guys that are on that list, on that tier, right? Like, guys like Bam Adebayo, guys like Rudy Gobert, guys like Giannis. But, like, the problem is like, most of those guys are too skinny to really hang with Jokic in his back down situations. So it's interesting to me that you see guys like Joel Embiid, like Karl Towns, even like Kevon Looney, like for lack of a better word, like the kind of chunkier, and I mean, again, like, they're professional athletes, that's not what I mean, but I just mean relative to the lean, kind of like skinnier looking athlete versus more of the chunkier, kind of like low center of gravity, heavy weight bigs, they tend to hold up better against Jokic because he's a back down player, and if you can hold your ground, you can force him into tougher shots. And again, like, that's not the same as saying Jokic stopper. It just is an example of a type of player that can make Jokic work harder, and the Warriors have one of those guys, and I think that is a legitimate point of optimism. And again, your offense had some real success against the Nugget defense in the fourth quarter up until that final adjustment with the Aaron Gordon switch, which the Warriors in a regular season setting were unable to kind of keep up with. NBA fans, the wait is over. Basketball is back, and DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, is celebrating with an unbeatable offer. New customers can score $200 instantly in bonus bets for throwing down $5 on the NBA. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. You'll start the season with an instant dub. And with DraftKings parlays, everyone's got a shot at an even bigger basketball win. String together multiple bets from the same game or build your parlay across multiple games for a shot at making your payday even sweeter. Basketball's more fun when you're in on the action. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets instantly for betting just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code HOOPS. The crown is yours.
Don't miss the action this weekend when the NFL heads to Germany for the Frankfurt games. These games will air on the NFL Network, I'll be watching, and stream on NFL Plus. Again, streaming on NFL Plus. For a limited time, Verizon customers can get Netflix Plus, NFL Plus for just $25 a month with Plus Play. That's $120 in annual savings. Plus Play is a platform where Verizon customers can shop, manage, and save on the subscriptions you already have, like NFL Plus. With NFL Plus Premium, you get access to games on mobile, NFL Red Zone, NFL Network, which means you can catch the Frankfurt games and more. Just go to Verizon.com/thevolume to bundle and save before the game. Hurry, this offer ends soon. Again, that's Verizon.com/thevolume.
All right, moving on to Sixers Celtics. Weird game. They start with Jrue Holiday on Joel Embiid, and which, it was funny because it started with basically what they were doing is they'd have Porzingis and Tatum on either Oubre or Harris, and they would bring those guys in help, and basically just kind of like whenever Embiid kind of put Jrue in a precarious position, that's what they would offer, right? Is that kind of backside help, especially when Jrue was trying to front the post. And there was an early play where Embiid spun off on the baseline and like dunked easily along the baseline, and everyone's like, "Uh-oh, like I'm not sure this matchup's going to work." And then Jrue Holiday actually got a bunch of stops. In general, I thought their defensive strategy was sound. They held Embiid to 27 points on 10 for 20 shooting with 6 turnovers. In general, I thought it was a good defensive game for the Celtics, but it was a dominant defensive game from Philly. There was a late flurry from Kristaps Porzingis and Jaylen Brown that made it look closer than it was, right? Like Kristaps Porzingis got a wide open three on the left wing that could have tied the game. But it was a kind of a flurry of things. Jaylen Brown hit 2 really tough threes in that stretch, and Porzingis got hot with his above the break 3-point shooting, and it kind of came down to that. But this was a pretty dominant performance. Like they held the Celtics to just 87 points through right about 45 minutes of the game. It really comes down to that combination that I always talk about. Like, we're not going to hit the Timberwolves today. Timberwolves fans, I know you're wanting to. God knows I love the Timberwolves, and I'm super high on that team. I was high on them coming into the season, but I want to do a deep dive on them. So we have a really small slate tonight in the Thursday night slate. So tomorrow we are going to hit a deep dive on the Minnesota Timberwolves and talk all about how good they've been to start this season. But what did I talk about with the Timberwolves? Like, it's that combination of perimeter defense with rim protection. If you can kind of put those two pieces together, you can be an excellent defense, especially if you can control the glass. And the Sixers are kind of high on perimeter defenders. Like, DeAnthony Melton is a very good perimeter defender. Patrick Beverley, when he's actually guarding guards, is a good perimeter defender. They're getting really good perimeter defense right now out of Tobias Harris, Kelly Oubre, and then Nick Batum. I was impressed with him flying around screens and playing good physical defense. Had several really good possessions on Jayson Tatum. And so they're basically just hounding the Celtics perimeter players all game long because they can match up with their guards and with their wings. And then Embiid's behind bothering shots in the paint, right? And that's the thing. Like, if you can really contain on the perimeter, at least to the best that you're capable of against a team that's talented, you can actually start to bait the Celtics into their worst tendencies. Because like when the Celtics really are operating freely and they're driving and kicking and they've got all their guys in rhythm, they're damn near impossible to guard. There's just too much ball handling and shooting on the floor, right? But like if you can kind of stagnate them a little bit and force them to like really have to work hard to generate quality shots, typically they won't do that. They won't patiently operate to generate quality shots. They'll usually just start settling for quick early threes, and that was what they were able to do in this game. They forced them. I think the Celtics took 47 threes, and a lot of them were rushed early shots in the shot clock. Did they miss some open looks too? Yes, but that's part of kind of that process. Like, you can throw a team out of rhythm, and then they start to miss the open ones as well. And that kind of looked like, again, like, I don't care how good the Sixers played defense. I don't care how poorly they shot compared to their expected quality. The Celtics straight up should never have 87 points through 45 minutes of NBA basketball. They have too much talent on their roster for that to happen. And so that's the thing, is like, it's kind of a two-part effort when it comes to slowing down the Celtics as it pertains to their, talent advantage. You've got to do your part in terms of the defensive containment on the perimeter, but then you have to essentially count on the Celtics to piss down their leg for the other half of it, right? And like, that's kind of been a consistent theme over the course of the last few years, is like, the Celtics kind of have two modes. They have like their good basketball thought process approach offensively mode, and then they have their we're settling for bad early threes mode and making poor rim decisions and things like that. Like that, if you can bait them into that, you can cause real problems. And then I thought the late game offense from Philly was really interesting. Tyrese Maxey really dominated the early portion of the fourth quarter, like basically from the beginning of the fourth quarter to about halfway through. He was really attacking Kristaps Porzingis in pick and roll. So there was a play, it was kind of like a sequence, and you could see the adjustments. So it started with Porzingis in a deep drop coverage. Maxey gets a good screen. I think Paul Reed was his screening partner at this point. Gets downhill, makes a floater over the top of Porzingis, right? So the next time they run it, Porzingis just switches, right? Because he's got to come out higher. They set a good screen and roll. Porzingis switches out to Maxey. Maxey takes his time, hits a dribble combination, beats Porzingis to the basket, and makes a floater to get another bucket. So then on the next switch, when Maxey gets Porzingis switched on the left wing, Derek White basically offers a soft double team from the right wing and basically comes over to the nail to basically help Porzingis contain Maxey on the switch. And so Tobias Harris just cuts out of the slot, and Maxey hits him with the bounce pass, and Tobias hits like a little 5-foot jump shot in the lane. So like, that's what's really impressive. It's impressive in a couple of different ways. First of all, it just goes to show you how dominant Tyrese Maxey can be in terms of his speed and beating people off the dribble. But secondly, that's the high-level shot creation piece. Like, if you need Maxey to be your best perimeter offensive option, and I don't know that he will be when the end of the season comes around, because I think the Sixers can make a trade, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But like, you want to see Maxey make high-level reads. You want to see him be able to deal with adjustments. Beating a drop coverage, beating a switch, then beating a switch with soft help or soft double team, that's an example of a progression. And he hit 3 of them in a row, got 3 straight buckets, and that was a huge part of their offensive success in the fourth quarter, right? So Joe Mazzulla responds by removing Kristaps Porzingis from the game. So from there, they run a ball screen, and Embiid gets a switch. So Embiid goes down to the post, and when they throw the post entry to Embiid, Horford tries to scram them out of the switch. And when he scrams them out of the switch, they're slow on the rotation, and Tobias Harris gets a wide open 3 on the left wing. Then on the down the stretch, we had the left block post up from Embiid. And again, like, one of the things you want to do with Embiid is you want to double off the dribble instead of when he has a live dribble. Double when he's dribbling versus when he's in a triple threat. Because Embiid, when he kind of can hold on to the basketball and protect it with his body, he's actually a decent passer. It's when he puts the ball on the floor that he really struggles to transition out of dribbling into making a read. So, but one of the things you can't do is make a really easy read for him. And the Celtics ended up doubling off of Tyrese Maxey 1 pass away. And in the process, it was just like Embiid was dribbling, but it's not a hard read. It's like, boop, right there. And easy left wing 3 from Tyrese Maxey. So like, they just basically picked the Celtics apart down the stretch of this game on offense. Did a really nice job containing them and forcing them into their worst tendencies on the defensive end of the floor. Again, we had that crazy run late, but then even then Embiid effectively iced it. I shouldn't even say that because Porzingis still had a chance to tie, but they were able to go down to Embiid against the switch against Jayson Tatum, and he hit a really nice right shoulder fade over the top that was like an easy shot that he got great separation that he's probably going to hit 5 out of 10 times, right? So like a lot of really encouraging stuff on the offensive end from the Sixers in that game as well. The Sixers have won 6 consecutive games since that regular season opener against Milwaukee, which in my opinion, they got absolutely hosed by the officials in that game. And you guys know I almost never say that, so clearly they did get hosed. They are now 5th in defense. They look awesome. And again, like I mentioned earlier, they are very well positioned for a midseason trade, which could end up pushing them over the top. Like we're going to talk about the Lakers and a potential midseason trade later. And like that's what's kind of exciting about the Sixers is like they're already good, even if they don't make this type of trade. Can they win the championship as currently constructed? No, not in my opinion. Not unless Embiid just finally translates his offensive success to the postseason, but that feels like a gamble. My guess is they're going to try to bring in more firepower, and if they do, they immediately vault into that top tier of contenders. For the Celtics, late game execution. There was a Jayson Tatum, especially on the defensive end is what I'm referencing here. There was a Jayson Tatum backcourt steal attempt where the Sixers were in transition and Tatum just like made this like half-assed bullshit like jump a passing lane thing in the backcourt, which ended up leaving them horribly undermanned on in transition defense, and Tobias Harris just had an easy driving layup out of the right corner. The doubling off of Philly's best three-point shooter, one pass away, that post up with Embiid off where they made the kick-out pass to Tyrese Maxey. Like, that's not even just the best shooter on the Sixers. That's one of the best three-point shooters in the entire NBA that you're just doubling off of one pass away in a read that Embiid's going to make every time. Like, that needs to be a literally like a windshield wiper rotation where like as the double's coming, Jaylen Brown's already there at Tyrese Maxey instead of like Horford goes and then Jaylen Brown goes a second later, and in that second they end up getting a wide open look. I talked about the botched scram switch. This is the one where like Embiid catches on the right block and or Embiid posts up on the right block and Horford runs over to basically scram them out of the switch, but they don't rotate on the back end, and it's a wide open three for Tobias Harris. So like again, down the stretch of the game, they just have to actually stick to their game plan and do their jobs. If they do that, that would go a long way towards giving them a better chance. And then their offensive approach. This is something I've seen in general with the Celtics over the years, and it really comes down to this: like they're so damn good and they have so many talented players that like they see shots that they like, their bar for what they consider to be a shot that they like to take is very low. And it's not because they're not capable or wanting to find higher quality shots. It's just because that's what they're capable of. Like a semi-contested Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Derek White three is like an okay shot. And they'll win a lot of games making those shots. Right? But they have so much ball handling and athleticism and quickness on the perimeter that they're actually capable of getting great shots, like truly great shots. And so they could tend to be a little impatient in their execution, especially in games against good perimeter defenses where it's not quite as easy and quick. And I thought that was a good example. Like they were 15 for 47 from three in this particular game. And I counted like a couple dozen threes where I'm like, there's a lot of time left on the shot clock here. Like, why are you taking that three? You know what I mean? Tatum had his worst game of the season, in my opinion. Big part of that was the same type of thing. There were two plays in particular, one on Nick Batum and one on Joel Embiid, where he caught the ball in a cleared ISO with plenty of space to operate in a with like 12, 13 seconds on the shot clock. And one of them, he just kind of like hit Batum with a series of jab steps and took a three, like a really tough three. And then another one he took, he ended up like just jabbing at Embiid a bunch of times in the right corner. I clipped this play and put it on my Twitter feed. He jabbed at Embiid a few times just to try to see if maybe he could concede a three-point shot to him. And then he swung the ball out of it. And I'm like, dude, like you torched this guy in the playoffs last year when he was playing too far off of you by shooting, but he's pressing up on you, like, and you're way quicker than him. beat him off the dribble and make a play that way. Like, they're just in general, I think the Celtics just can be lulled to sleep in terms of their shot selection, and they can really fall into extended stretches of taking bad shots, and this is an example of that. And that's why, like, no matter how good their net rating is, no matter how dominant they are in this regular season, like, I can't in my right mind pick the Celtics to win the title before the playoffs unless there is a significant injury to someone on the Nuggets or on the Bucks, right? Because, like, as far as I'm concerned, it is not a regular season issue. It is a postseason issue. They are capable of long, extended offensive lulls, and it starts with Tatum and Brown and their approach. And until that changes, it just isn't. It's just not a problem that's going away. And like, it's very possible that this year ends up being the year where Tatum figures it all out and the Celtics kind of are pushed over the top by that. But I can tell you right now what it's going to be like from my perspective. I'm not going to pick the Celtics. I certainly know that they're capable of it. And I'm going to have to be one of those guys that's like, shit, I'm late to the party. Like, Tatum's that guy now. You know, he won the title. He got it all done. Like, I can't in my right mind make that prediction because it's wishful thinking based on something that I haven't seen yet, if that makes sense. All right, last game before we get out of here, Rockets-Lakers. Shout out to the Houston Rockets. Like I said earlier, there are 4 teams in the NBA that are top 10 in both offense and defense: the Celtics, the Sixers, the Nuggets, and the Houston Rockets. Now, they're on the fringes of that. They're 9th in defense and 10th in offense, but still really impressive nonetheless. Very fun team. They're a very fun team. Hang on one sec. Got a phone call. They're a very fun team. Jalen Green, and again, this is a really good matchup for him against the unathletic Laker guards, but he just has this incredible combination of athleticism and quickness to beat people off the dribble, mixed with like top tier vertical athleticism to finish at the rim. And he's got this jump shot piece of it. And it's a little inconsistent right now, but that's what you expect from younger guards. But he got that jump shot going last night, and you can kind of see how difficult it is to guard him when that happens. Alperen Sengun, in my opinion, is one of the top, I'd have to make a list, but he's certainly in that list of like elite offensive centers in the league that just makes it incredibly difficult to guard the Rockets, because you literally can't switch anything but a good post defender onto Sengun. Like, he, even against bigger, stronger players, like he buried Rui Hachimura under the rim a bunch of times. He was killing Christian Wood. Like, they just couldn't guard him down there. And this has been a somewhat consistent theme throughout the season. Like, Ime Udoka just really trusts Sengun to kind of be somewhat of a fulcrum in their offense because of his ability to operate in pick and roll and in the post. And then Dillon Brooks and Jabari Smith Jr. just bring that perimeter defense element. They're 9th in defensive rating. Jabari Smith is one of my favorite young players in the league. My friend Sam Esfandiari, who covers the Warriors with the Light Years podcast, and he also helps to run the Watch Playback program. He tweeted this out last night, and I thought it was a really interesting point. He's like, remember when Memphis basically blamed Dillon Brooks for all of their issues, which is another thing that we talked about after the season, like how they kind of scapegoated Dillon for it. And like, here we are now, and the Grizzlies can't win a damn game, and the Rockets are top 10 in defense. And I said in the summer, and I meant this sincerely, like, Dillon Brooks is not my favorite player. It's specifically there's a difference between talking trash on the court and talking trash in the media. Talking trash in the court, to me, is like natural competitiveness. Talking trash in the media, to me, is performative for attention. And he leans really heavy on that and can be actually kind of flat out disrespectful to to many of the great NBA players that have played in this league. Like, LeBron's just one of many people that he's kind of talked like that to and about. And then secondly, the injuries, like I've seen him. It's not just the Gary Payton play from the playoff series 2 years ago. Like, Dillon Brooks is like kind of reckless with some of his overt physicality in a way that can hurt players. And that, to me, I have just a huge problem with, because you're starting to mess with people's livelihood there, right? Like, Gary Payton was a guy who now has kind of like an established place in the league, but at that point in time was very much kind of there, just hanging out, maybe gets to make the roster next year, right? And like, it ended up being an injury he was able to return from, but what if it had been worse? It could have literally ended his NBA career. So like, I have a huge problem with some of the things that Dillon Brooks does, but based purely on his defense, he is worth the contract that he signed. And when you combine that with the fact that he's actually starting to hit shots, we saw this a little bit in FIBA, and then we're seeing it so far this year. Like, he's just been a more efficient and smarter offensive player than he was in earlier years in his career. And so he's actually a deeply impactful winner on that team. And then they just have a ton of athleticism off the bench. They had 11 offensive rebounds just from their bench group in that game. Guys like, Tari Eason, Jeff Green, I think, had 3 or 4 offensive rebounds. They did a really nice job just punishing the Lakers for their lack of effort and intensity and athleticism. So what's wrong with the Lakers? I want to put down 3 key issues. And again, I know we've talked about this to death, but I'm a Laker fan and I want to vent for a little while. So I'm going to tuck this. Again, they're relegated to the end of the show, and they're going to be at the end of the show for the foreseeable future until they start playing better basketball. But Anthony Davis being hurt, obviously that plays a role. Injuries in general, a big one here early on. Jared Vanderbilt is your best perimeter defender. He's out. Anthony Davis is your best player. He's out. Gabe is your best perimeter defender from the guard core. He's out. Jackson Hayes is literally the backup center you need to have 2 NBA level centers when Anthony Davis is out of the lineup. He's out. And 2 of those guys are among your most important rebounders. Like, Jared Vanderbilt literally averaged 7 rebounds a game last year. Again, you have to understand, the Lakers post-deadline last year with the same core of players. Post-deadline last year, the only difference is Dennis Schroeder, right? And Gabe Vincent is not as good as Dennis Schroeder, but he is a reasonable facsimile of him as a perimeter defender, right? Dennis is an elite perimeter defender, and Gabe Vincent is just good, but he's a reasonable facsimile of what he does, and he's a better offensive player. So even if you just take the one rotation piece out from last year, they replaced him with the guy who started for an NBA Finals team last year, right? So same core guys. Post-deadline last year were 2nd in defensive rating and 4th in defensive rebounding percentage. So 4th in rebounding percentage. I think they were 6th in defensive rebounding percentage. So this was an elite defense and an elite rebounding team last year with the same group of players. But what you're seeing is Jared Vanderbilt is kind of vitally important there. And then when you take him and Anthony Davis out of the equation, they just become completely incapable of hanging with any sort of athletic team. And now here's the question. Is that a problem in the big picture? No, if they're healthy, right? But because we literally saw they were elite in both categories when those guys are healthy. But it is a reality in the sense that they don't have any margin for error there. So if one of those guys goes down, they struggle too much to contend in those areas of the game. So that is a great example of how bolstering the backcourt with athleticism, getting an athletic guard in there to play next to Austin Reeves would go a long way towards helping them in that situation. But make no mistake, injuries are playing a significant role here. Number 2, the guards are not consistently scoring the basketball, which is what you pay them for. Austin and D'Lo both signed long-term deals with the Lakers this summer at big numbers, literally because they are excellent offensive players. They are both excellent spot-up players. They are both excellent pick-and-roll shot creators, at least within the context of the regular season. D'Angelo Russell in the playoffs is a whole other thing. But even though he's matchup dependent, had some issues, like the Nuggets kicked him out, he had some big games. And hit a bunch of big shots in Game 4 against Memphis in that game that they won. He had a bunch of big moments in the Golden State Warriors series. So I don't see D'Angelo Russell on this roster post deadline, but strictly within the context of the regular season, he was supposed to be a guy that could score the basketball and set you up, and so was Austin. And instead, it's been super inconsistent. It's this game, you get really solid production in the second half out of D'Angelo Russell, but you get an absolute dud out of Austin Reeves. You go back to the Miami game, you get a pretty damn good game out of Austin Reeves, but you get an absolute dud out of D'Angelo Russell. And it's they just can't get consistent production out of those two. Here's where that's a problem. When those guys are playing great offensively, it makes it easier for you to deal with some of their limitations, right? And the whole team, when guys are making shots, the whole team plays harder, and it kind of manifests in a bunch of positives, right? But when they're not scoring the basketball and they're not making shots, then their defensive limitations and rebounding limitations scream at you in the face when you're watching on the television, right? And so that's kind of the issue here is last year, I think what made the Austin D'Lo backcourt work for the most part in most matchups was Jared Vanderbilt. because Jared Vanderbilt was essentially a guard on the defensive end because he guarded the other team's best perimeter player, and then he was also an excellent rebounder. And so that kind of like solved that issue, right? And then we found out like when you got into like the Nuggets series and you found a team that could like ignore Jared Vanderbilt and cause some problems for you on your offensive end of the floor while at the same time punishing your lack of athleticism on the other end of the floor, suddenly D'Angelo Russell becomes completely unplayable and it's untenable, right? So like that, in my opinion, we're going to talk about it in a second, like there's going to be a D'Angelo Russell trade this season, in my opinion. I think it's like one of the safest bets to take place this year, but that can't happen until at a minimum January 15th. So what happens until then? Well, if the Lakers want to have any chance to float the ship until then, they need Austin and D'Lo to score the damn basketball. Now, one of the concepts that is important here is the way that they're playing. In my opinion, the best team-specific podcast out there, like a group of podcasters that strictly covers one team, is the Laker Film Room guys, and Pete Zayas in particular, and Darius Soriano, and Mike as well, Mike Trudell. They do a really nice job covering the Lakers on a day-to-day basis. But one of the things that Pete Zayas has been like heavily hammering on this season that we haven't talked about much is the overall offensive approach. So the Lakers are running more of a 5-out offense this year versus a 4-out, 1-in offense. What does that mean? A 5-out offense is like what Golden State runs, right? And we've talked about this a ton in our Golden State coverage, right? The concept of their 5-out offense and the way that it works, and how everything kind of centers around inverted spacing and pulling defenders away from the basket. And it's like read and react, like dribble handoff flowing into another dribble handoff flowing into a ball screen, while off ball guys are interchanging as well. Like it's a lot of ball and player movement centered around the perimeter. But it's more difficult to generate dribble penetration in those situations. And the main reason why is just think of it from the standpoint of geometry. If I were to take the three-point line and stretch it out in a long, thin line, and I put 4 dots on it, they'd be really far apart, right? But if I put 5 dots on it, they'd all be a little bit closer, right? And so as a result of that, like the actual gaps that you have to shoot through are smaller. Now, if you can shoot through the gap, it's much harder to rotate on the backside because you don't have a rim protector waiting for you. Typically, that rim protector has been pulled out to the perimeter. It's just harder to shoot through those gaps. And specifically, you're seeing Austin Reeves and D'Angelo Russell struggle to break through those gaps, right? And LeBron James has been one of the best offensive players for the Lakers earlier in the season, and it's because he's a downhill threat. He's the guy that can actually like see a small gap, and he doesn't really have to come through it clean because he's so damn big and strong that he can just power through that gap, right? And he can also generate rim pressure through post-ups and in transition and things along those lines, right? So like one of the things that I would like to see the Lakers do more often is go back out to their traditional 4-out, 1-in spacing. What does that look like? That looks like you put, shooter in the you want a shooter in the strong side corner, so they don't help out of the strong side corner. You have a shooter in the weak side corner, and then you have a shooter on the right wing, right? And then basically you have Anthony Davis come up and set ball screens in a spaced out floor for typically you want your ball handler in the position where they're most comfortable. So like for D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves, it might be different. But then basically you're just bringing AD up to set a ball screen, and you're working off that ball screen trying to make something happen. And if it doesn't work, you kick it back out and you run another ball screen. And what the thing is like that's what the Lakers did for the most part last season. And Austin Reeves in particular really thrived with that, but even D'Angelo Russell as well operated well in that system. And so, one of the things I'd like to see the Lakers do is just kind of like go back to more spread pick and roll and let their guys operate with more space and with more opportunity to dribble and less of the read and react thing. I think that there's advantage to being able to play that way, and I don't want them to discard it entirely. But like to me, it's a pretty clear sign that like you played a certain type of offensive approach last year and it worked really well, and then you're playing a different type of offensive approach this year and it's struggling a little bit, right? And so like I'd like to see them kind of go back to running more spread pick and roll for their best ball handlers. And then just in general, like I think especially if your big picture plan is to potentially trade D'Angelo Russell, I would lean more on LeBron and Austin. And like, I don't think it's a coincidence that LeBron and Austin were the ones that kind of brought you back against the Miami Heat. And again, I'm not trying to let Austin off the hook. He didn't play well in that game last night, and he's been pretty inconsistent to start the season, right? But like we've just seen in the playoff context, like Austin is just a significantly better and more reliable playoff player than D'Angelo Russell is. Like that's your big picture offense is LeBron and AD, or LeBron and Austin kind of running things with Anthony Davis as a screener and with LeBron James as a screener, right? And so to me, like I would kind of lean on D'Lo more in an off-ball role anyway. I think he's a very good off-ball shooter. He's not shooting the ball well this year, but that's something that he can do at a high level. And so I think that that's something that I'd like to see them lean into a little bit more. The last major issue is just general defensive energy. I think that in general with this Laker team, I think they were fooled in the preseason by thinking they were a great offense, because they were a great offense in the preseason. And it was the same personnel that wasn't a great offense last year, right? They were just a good offense last year, and they struggled in the half court, right? So with that being the case, like the only way this team can win is by being a dominant defense and rebounding team. That's how they won. The same group of guys won by being top 5 in defense, top 5 in rebounding, and just enough offense, right? And this year it's been like, you can just tell in terms of their allocation of resources, in terms of energy and effort, they're just not playing hard enough on defensively and on the glass. And so I think that is just an attitude adjustment that the whole group needs, right? So the question is, what's fixable and what isn't? So are the Lakers a bad defense and rebounding team in the big picture when they're healthy? No, we know that from the numbers. But they're very dependent on Jared Vanderbilt in this case and Anthony Davis. So in general, I think I would view that as a roster need. Like they need to improve their perimeter defense to give them the ability to have not just depth night in and night out, but a playoff option as a point of attack defender if Jared Vanderbilt can't make enough shots to stay on the floor, right? So that to me probably needs to be addressed in a trade at some point. Are guys going to keep missing shots? We talked about yesterday how every key Lakers rotation player is shooting well below their career norms in terms of three-point shooting. Now, again, there's two sides to this coin. What do I always say about shooting? I just talked about this with the Celtics. Like it's a little bit of both. Like, are guys missing shots? Yeah. But also you're not generating enough rim pressure, and so you're not getting the high quality 3-point shots that'll get these guys into a rhythm, right? That kind of goes back to the 5-out versus spread pick and roll thing that we were talking about earlier. So in general, I'd like to see guys start making shots, but I don't think it's really going to happen until they just start executing better offensively. That said, do I think the Lakers have a shooting problem? No, because Austin Reeves can really shoot it. D'Angelo Russell can really shoot it. Even if they trade him, Gabe Vincent can really shoot it. Taurean Prince can really shoot it. Rui Hachimura can really shoot it, even if he ends up getting traded. They have enough backcourt and off-ball shooting to be good enough, especially if they get a player back in a trade that can also shoot the basketball. I just don't think they'll shoot better in the short term until they start executing better offensively. And then lastly, like the Austin D'Lo backcourt, is that fixable? No. In my opinion, that's something they have to eventually address, and this is why I think D'Angelo Russell getting traded is like one of the safer bets of this NBA season. You can't have that kind of redundancy in your backcourt if you want to try to win a championship. It's the same reason why I think the Bucks will inevitably make some sort of move with Malik Beasley and Pat Connaughton at that 2-guard spot, like to upgrade that position in some way, shape, or form. Like you just can't win when you have two players in your backcourt that struggle at the point of attack and on the glass. And so from there, Austin's clearly the better player. You actually have him tied up long term at a better number. He's your better playoff player as well. And D'Angelo Russell, like to me, like was the one guy last year in the playoff run that like struggled the most in terms of the night in, night out consistency. So like to me, D'Lo doesn't fit with Austin. Rui plays the same position as LeBron. So you pair those two together, you get to 30-something million in salary. You have 2 first-round picks to use. That's a really good trade package. Rui is a good starter-level NBA player who can play for someone in the league. D'Angelo Russell is a good starter-level NBA player that can start for a team as long as they're not trying to compete for a title, right? So, like, someone out there is going to see value in those two guys. And then the draft picks. Again, any Laker draft pick, especially with their tendency to go through long, extended, poor play in the Genie Bus era, those draft picks have real value, right? And so I think they're in a position where, like, everything comes down to that trade deadline for the Lakers. If they can hit one really high quality trade with D'Lo and Rui, I think that can kind of round out some of the other pieces of the roster. Now, the good news, and this is the upside from a bad start, because like 3-5 obviously is a disaster, but the good news is LeBron James and Christian Wood look great. LeBron, 63% true shooting. His volume is down. His scoring numbers are down. He's at like 24.5 points per game. But a huge part of that is usage, right? Like there's just a huge convoluted nature to their ball handling. And LeBron's usage is actually the lowest it's been since 2017, which is like, 6 or 7 years. So like, even though the box score numbers don't show it, I actually think LeBron looks better than he did at any point last year. His shot making looks much better. I think that's all really, really good. So then one of the things we've learned is that Christian Wood is actually a very good defensive player for the Lakers as a help side defender versus as a pick and roll defender. And that was the thing, is like when they signed Christian Wood, everyone looked at all these defensive possessions of Christian Wood defending pick and roll with the Mavs, and he struggled with it. And it's like, that's not what he's good at. He's not good at kind of striking that balance between offering help on a ball handler and keeping track of a roll man. He's not going to be that guy who can ride the yo-yo up and down in pick and roll coverages. But what he can do is be the low man. So like if you can put him on a non-shooter or relatively less deadly shooter, and you have Anthony Davis run your ball screen defense, and Christian Wood operates as that low man. So like when Anthony Davis comes up, Christian Wood is the one who comes over and help. He's actually a very impactful defender there, because he's got good instincts to go up for shot blocks. And then secondly, he's a good defensive rebounder. And so that to me, like with that combined with Christian Wood starting to hit threes and with what he can do offensively to maintain their spacing with two bigs on the floor, like that's a huge silver lining. And so it's weird because like I look back and I go like, did I think the Lakers would be able to get stops or rebounds without Jared Vanderbilt and Anthony Davis? No, I never thought they would. So that's not a shock. Did I think Austin and D'Lo could be the backcourt for a championship team? No, I never thought that. I said before the season that I didn't think that would work and inevitably would end in a trade, right? So like those problems were problems we already knew about. Here's what we didn't know. We didn't know that LeBron might look better than he did last year, which he does. And we didn't know that Christian Wood might be a viable option as to give the Lakers a legitimate big look. And so like as crazy as it sounds, like there's actually a lot of reason for optimism for the Lakers in their 3-5 start, because there are little things that like you weren't expecting that are positives, and most of their struggles are mostly due to injuries and a trade they were inevitably going to have to make anyway, right? So like obviously it sucks. I kind of hate this basketball team early on because they don't play hard all the time. As a fan, they're not super fun to watch right now. But I think in the big picture, there's still reason for optimism with that group. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I appreciate your support. We'll be back tomorrow. Might break down one of the Thursday night games. For sure going to do a deep dive on the Minnesota Timberwolves.